Are you ready to dive into a quilting adventure? Join me as I transform these bright, colorful fabrics into a breathtaking underwater scene. This tropical fish art quilt is packed with color and personality. I'm going to show you how to create your own masterpiece from start to finish. I'll show you essential quilting techniques like piecing and applique in this video. We'll start with piecing the blocks for the borders, and then we're going to applique the fish onto the center panel. So let your imagination swim free and let's get started. So let's take a close look at this quilt. This quilt is made with the center panel of the tropical fish, and around it the border is made with half square triangles, and then the cornerstones are made with squares with a triangle in one corner. The quilt measures 20 inches by 17 inches. So it's a nice small quilt, and you can easily use scraps of fabric. If you have any bonus half square triangles from your other projects, you can easily use that for your quilt. And these bright and colorful fabrics really remind me of tropical vacations. It's a great summer quilt, a great scrap quilt, and a small fun project to work on in between your bigger projects. And this would make a great gift for a friend. Let's go over the fabric requirements for this tropical fish quilt. For the yellow fabric, you'll need 1/3 yard. You can also use any other light color fabric. This will be for the half square triangles as well as the cornerstones. For the other colors, you'll need 1/4 of a yard total of the fabric. I use reds, oranges, and pinks for that. And you'll need 1/4 of a yard for the water fabric. It's less than that, but that's probably the minimum that you can buy. And then you also need 1/2 a yard for the backing and 1/4 of a yard for binding. With this fabric, you're going to start cutting. For the half square triangles, you need 40 squares, 3 inches by 3 inches. 20 of the squares will be the light ones, which I'm using yellow for my quilt, and 20 squares will be the darker colored fabrics, the reds and the oranges and the purples. For the cornerstones, we're going to need 4 yellow squares, or the lighter colors, whichever you choose, 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches, and 4 of the colored squares for the corner triangles, 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. You'll need 1 rectangle, 8 inches by 12.5 inches for the background for the fish. I like to wait until I'm done with piecing the half square triangles to decide whether I need to adjust this in order to fit the size that I actually made. Last but not least, you'll also need to cut scraps of fabric for the fish. And you can just use whatever scraps you have, and you can choose your fish design. I have here in this slide a whole bunch of different choices that you can use for the fish. So you can get some ideas about how you want your fish to look in this slide. My idea is to use one of these blue fabrics for the water for the fish. So this will be the center applique portion. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make half square triangles out of this fabric, and I can use the rest of it for the fish. And basically I need to divide these into lights and darks. I'm thinking maybe I can just have one of these yellows be the background, or maybe both of them. But these will be the background fabric, and then these other colors can just work on the darker color. So I'll go ahead and cut some squares out of these to make the half square triangles. I think I'll just make the 2 at a time method so that I can get a lot of variety out of these. So the measurements for a half square triangle, that's going to be 2 inches. It'd be 2 7/8. I'm just going to round up to 3, and I can adjust the applique portion if I need to, so I don't have to trim all the blocks. Two, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I think this one's not there. it's 14, so short 2. Okay. So if your fabric's not straight, you can line it up this way, just edge to edge, and then you just move your fabric back and forth until the bottom of the fold is even and flat. You'll be able to see here that it's flat. And if this looks lumpy, then it's not flat yet. You can see why I was having trouble with this part, because this is not a straight cut. Now it should be. I'm going to trim off the edge here to make it straight. And basically I'm just lining up the top and the bottom because I know that the side is not straight. So I can just make sure that if the top and the bottom are aligned properly with the folds, it should be straight. And then I like to do a double check. You can compare the fabric. You can see that it's a straight line and there's no V shapes here. And also do that with this, with the fold, the other fold. And you can see this is also a straight fold, so it should be good. And then I can cut to a 3-inch. So now what I need to do is to cut the corresponding fabrics from here. This will make a nice variety of fabric for each of these colors. So now what I'm going to do is to draw a line on the back and of the yellows, put them right sides together, so on each side of the line, and then I'll have each of these will come up with 2 half square triangles. Just going corner to corner, make a line, and then I'll sew on each side of the line once I'm ready. So what I'm going to do now is to place the colored fabric with my background right sides together. I'm going to sew on both sides of this line, and when I'm finished I'll sew here. Then I'll have 2 half square triangles that I can use for the border. I like to chain piece these blocks. Just sew to the right side of the line in each of the blocks without breaking any thread in between the blocks. And then when you're finished with that, just turn the whole set around and sew on the other side. Again, you'll be sewing on the right side of the line. You can then separate the blocks from each other and then cut on the line that you had drawn so that each set of squares will make 2 half square triangles. Open the blocks and press towards the dark fabric. To avoid the bulk in the seam, you can clip away the dog ears, the little excess fabric that sticks out from your blocks. With this colorful fabric, the trash looks like confetti. Arrange the blocks the way you want them in your quilt. I alternated mine so that they look like a block that's called flying geese. At this time I was still planning on making a square quilt, so there's not as many blocks as the finished project. Sew the blocks together in rows, keeping the 4 borders separate. To make it easier for myself, I just sewed the blocks into pairs first, and then worked on joining the pairs together. It's time to press the blocks yet again. For the top rows, press everything to the left side, and for the bottom rows, press everything to the right side. This will make the rows easier to put together. Then sew your blocks together into rows. Press again and then sew the rows to each other for each of the 4 borders. And yes, it's time to press again. So I finished these flying geese units, and what I'm going to do is add some cornerstones to these. To finish off the edge. And I'm also going to do is to add some triangles. That'll go like this, so that the ones in the corners will look like they're flying geese that continue on both directions. I think they need to be a little bit smaller than this to be able to finish off the flying geese here. So this is 3 inches, so I'm thinking maybe 2.5 inches is what I need to finish this off. I also need to cut the background for the fish, but I'll do that after I'm finished with the border. So here's the flying geese units that are going to be on the sides of the quilt, facing inward this way, facing this direction. I added an extra flying geese unit to the top and the bottom, and I also added cornerstones with the triangle, with the corner triangle, so that would look like a flying geese unit there. And so now the quilt will look like this. Okay, so that's a nice quilt. It's small enough to make quickly, and yet it's big enough to make me feel like it's a satisfying size. And it'll give me lots of room to make a fish here. Okay, so now I'm going to choose the size of this background fabric for the fish. Let me just make sure it's going to look okay here. I think this is how we had set it. It's pretty bright. The other option, the other blue, was this one. It's this one. And this is why I like to say, I like to wait until I cut to make all the decisions that I make, so that I can make sure that I'm happy with the decision before I actually start cutting into the fabric. But I think I'm going to just go with this color. I think it's going to add a nice background to the quilt, and then the fish that's going to be in front will get lots of attention. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece of this to match this size and this size, and that way it'll be ready for piecing together. Okay, so to decide on the size of the fabric that I'm going to be using for my background fish, I'm going to use the length of this fabric, the width of this fabric on the side, so this will make sure that it matches here, and it'll be able to be sewn in here. And for the width, I need to compare it to this piece. Remember, this is the piece that has the extra flying geese, so it's longer than the other piece. It just has one extra flying geese, so it's longer than the other piece. And I've already sewn the side cornerstones in, but I can just fold them back down again to decide on the length of this. And as I look at the length, it looks like it's 13.5. Now I want to just flatten it out as much as possible without stretching it, and it's to me it looks like it's going to be 13.5 inches. And so what I'm going to do now is to cut this in 13.5. Now the problem that I have right now is that my ruler is too narrow to be able to cut this straight, and my other ruler is too short to be able to cut 13.5. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold this fabric in half, to make sure that I have the right, just to make sure that I'm able to use this ruler. I'll just cut off the selvage here, and then I can cut the 13.5 easily now. So I'm making sure that this ruler is straight on the fold here. I'm checking here also, and then I have the 13.5 here and here to make sure that I have all of this straight, and then I can just cut this. And now I have a 13.5 piece of fabric that I can easily just sew into my quilt. Then I'll lay out the border around the center rectangle to make sure that I know exactly where all the pieces will go, and it looks like that they will fit. Like this. Once these are sewn together, some of this fabric will be in the seam allowance, and so then it'll fit correctly with this side. One big rectangle, and then I can start appliquing the fish onto the center panel here. Press everything nice and flat before you start sewing the borders to the center panel. Sew the shorter borders to each side of the rectangle. Then it's time to press again. I like to press away from the center. Then it's time to sew the top and bottom borders to the quilt. I like to pin the pieces to make sure that the blocks are properly aligned to each other. Then sew. Be sure to remove the pins as you go along. You guessed it, time to press again. Okay, now the quilt top is ready for the applique. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more quilting videos. Okay, so it's more decision making time. Here's the quilt background, and I'm going to add a fish here. I got a picture that I think that I like. It's just a random picture of a fish that I'm going to see how I can turn that into a fish for my quilt. And what I thought I would do is just add a base layer and then add more colors to it to be able to use up a lot of my extra scraps that I have. You can press some fusible to the back of each of your fabrics, but for this project I decided not to use any fusible. So here I am just pinning the template to the fabric as it is, and I'm going to start by cutting out the biggest piece. And then as I go along, I'm going to choose the fabrics that I want to use for each of the smaller pieces, changing my mind as I go along, and then arranging them onto the background of the fish. But I think this is good so far, and I'll just go ahead and glue all this down with my school glue, and then I can start sandwiching the quilt. And I don't care if this part is perfect, I just want to make sure that it pretty much stays in the right general area. But if it's not exactly the way I left it originally, I'm fine with that. Okay, I think it's all glued down close enough. So I'll sandwich the quilt, and then I'll take it to the sewing machine for quilting. So here's what my tropical fish quilt looks like now. We've got the half square triangles that look like flying geese with a bright yellow background. Nice bright colorful colors with the pinks and the reds and the purples. I have my fish, which is applique. Right now it's just glued on with some children's glue, and I need to quilt it down to make sure that it stays secure. For my quilting plan, I was thinking about quilting this quilt with a darker color so that it would stand out a little bit more against the bright border fabric. And so if I made this black, for example, then it would stand out a lot more than it does now. I think it just right now it's receding too much. And so mostly I think I'm just going to go around all the edges of the quilt and all the edges of the applique to secure this, all these pieces here, because right now they're just glued on with some children's glue. And then for the background here, I think I'm going to quilt this pretty heavily to make the fish stand out more. And mostly I was thinking maybe some little bubbles here and just swirls to go along with the design that's here. I might just mimic the designs that are already on the fabric to go with that. And I'll use a color that recedes in the background, just like a blue or a purple, so that it doesn't stand out at all. I have gray thread in the machine now, so maybe I'll just do that part first. And for the borders, I was thinking about, again, something really simple to not draw too much attention. Maybe I could just do like wavy lines into each of the flying geese. And for this outside part, maybe out of this center line, if I make lines into here, it would help me go back and forth, and also it would like kind of point to the fish itself, maybe. Okay, so I have a quilting plan. The quilt is already sandwiched with this backing fabric. I'm going to use the same backing fabric here for the binding. It'll draw out the purples in here, and it'll also finish off the quilt, I think, pretty well. Okay, so now I have a game plan. I'll meet you at the sewing machine, and I'll start quilting down the background here since I have the gray in the machine, and then we'll switch out the color for the background of the fish, and then I'll have to choose a brighter color for the triangles and for the cornerstones. Yeah, I think I'm going to go into the yellow and the orange color rather than to these colors. I have a light orange color. I'm just going to use it this way, and then I can use it. This also put me in a good position then to go ahead and make the straight lines this direction. Okay, so here's our two colors that we're going to use. I'll meet you at the sewing machine. I'm quilting down the background of the fish now, since that's the thread that I have in the machine already. I hope you enjoyed seeing this tropical fish come to life as much as I enjoyed making this quilt. And I hope you make your own quilt like this. Thank you for watching. I appreciate all of your support. I hope you have a bright and colorful day. And I'll see you in the next video.